Welcome to the ultimate age of the geek, where we take deep dives into TV and film and take a look at these projects through nerd vision goggles. We are your hosts. I'm Quiggs, and this is Dave.
Hello there.
So this week we are talking about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Dave, what are your thoughts on this movie? I know this is a movie that you really enjoyed and something that wasn't even on my radar until we started doing this.
Yeah, I really like this movie a lot. On the surface, it's a fun, silly movie with some amazingly directed action sequences and references to multiple other properties, specifically a Pixar reference that makes me laugh every time it's there. But I think that this movie has a lot going for it under its surface as well. I think it tells a really interesting story, not in like a super dramatic way. It's not like a full-blown drama, but it definitely dives into some more serious topics and mental health, and the mother-daughter relationship is pretty significant, and I think it's written really well. Yeah, I really enjoy this movie quite a bit.
Like I said before, it wasn't even on my radar until you wanted to do this for the podcast. And I was like, I mean, I guess I'll watch it. It always looked kind of goofy. Like you said, there is actually a lot going on underneath the surface. Like it starts off really kind of claustrophobic and chaotic. And then things just open up so much as the movie goes on. And in the beginning, you get little flashes of how there is something deeper going on right from the get-go.
Yeah.
I also really enjoyed how this movie, it takes on some big questions about multiversal kind of things and family and meaning of life and all of that kind of stuff. Like it dives a lot deeper than I expected it to. Not all of the answers pay off. I mean, but it dives into these things and explores these things pretty well.
It does. Yeah. I think that it's really insane to me that they're able to make this like crazy multiversal movie, and yet it has this like heart to it, right? It feels so big and so small at the same time, right? Some of the main conflict of the movie deals with this, with a very big idea, with like just the implications of a multiverse. Also, there is a very personal story happening at the same time, inseparably linked to the bigger topic. Whenever somebody asks me, like, what genre is this movie? I'm just like, every genre. There's not a whole lot of genres that it doesn't cover inside this movie.
Yeah, and I feel like it is not just this movie, but a lot of movies nowadays. It can be tough to place exactly what genre they fit into. Like, there's at least 3.
This dials it up to 11.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's true. Like, there's so much in there.
This is a drama. This is a comedy. This is a sci-fi. This is a martial arts movie. This is, if you really like dive into all the themes and the different things going on, I think you could find even more in there. It's existential in a way that I feel like is almost like Stanley Kubrick level.
There are definitely
at certain parts.
Yeah, there are definitely some scenes that give off that vibe. That's for sure.
And I think because it basically does every genre, it is everything, everywhere, all at once. An excellently titled movie. It's not a movie for everybody. Like, I think it's a little too much for some people. I think it just like the sheer amount of things happening in this movie and amount of things that hit the screen and everything. I think some people could not handle that.
Yeah, like I needed to watch it through twice just to make sure I think I got everything. And I still don't think I got everything. I mean, there were still things that I forgot.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Like my wife, this movie is just too weird for her.
It does get off the walls. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter that it has this heart and this underlying message and these other big ideas going on. It doesn't matter that all that is there. There's just so much in this movie. It's too much for her. She's not alone in that. I think there are people that this movie would be too much for.
Well, and that could be said for any movie. Some people aren't going to like it, but It can be a lot for sure. I had to watch it twice to digest everything.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine watching this movie once and formulating a complete opinion of it. Since it came out, I think I've seen it.
The thing that struck me most about this movie, though, is that I think they represented and handled multiverse and multiverse travel and all of that much better than the Doctor Strange movie.
Oh, definitely.
Like we got to see a more diverse range of multiverses. The way that they kind of interact with the other universes was cool too. I mean, it seemed broader in scope, whereas in Doctor Strange, we heard about the broadness of scope and we got like a very quick flash of a bunch of different universes at once, all in a 30-second montage. And then we got stuck in maybe a two or three other multiverses. So whereas this movie, we actually get a deeper dive into some other universes, and not just other universes, but sometimes drastically different universes.
I think that movie is not properly named because this came out like 2 months or so before Doctor Strange, and to watch this and then go to Doctor Strange, which is called Multiverse of Madness, and you're just going to be like, well, that wasn't really that maddening, right?
So should we get into the synopsis?
Yeah, sure. Spoilers ahead if you have not seen Everything Everywhere All at Once. Everything. Evelyn is a Chinese American immigrant who runs a laundromat with her husband Waymond. The two are being audited and planning for a Chinese New Year's party. The two head off with Evelyn's father to the IRS to meet with the agent auditing them, Deirdre. In the elevator, Waymond's entire demeanor changes and he tells her to either go to the desk or to the closet. He then writes a set of instructions down for her. Unable to pay attention to what is happening, Evelyn goes along with the instructions, and suddenly she is experiencing life in both the janitor's closet and Deirdre's desk. Waymond in the closet explains the multiverse to Evelyn and quickly warns her about a great evil attacking all universes, Jobutapaki. Just before the two are killed, Evelyn is violently thrust back into her own universe where Deirdre lets them go. But out of great confusion, Evelyn assaults Deirdre, and when security show, Waymond makes quick work of them. Back in the other universe, Jobu Tupaki appears, and she quickly locates the universe with Evelyn. It is revealed that Jobu Tupaki is Evelyn and Waymond's daughter, Joy. The IRS building is thrust into chaos, and the two are trying to find a way out when Deirdre, possessed by another universe version of herself, appears and a fight ensues. Evelyn finds a way to verse jump and fights her off. Waymond and her father from the universe that created Jobu Tupaki try to convince her that Joy must be killed, but Evelyn decides to become like Joy and experience all universes at once. She jumps randomly and fights off multiple agents trying to stop her. Eventually, her mind overloads and she falls over, seemingly dead, everywhere. Evelyn's mind splinters further and she faces Jobu Tupaki across multiple universes, learning that Joy's plan is to jump into her everything bagel because nothing matters. She wants Evelyn to join her. With the stress of experiencing everything, everywhere, she agrees. However, after seeing the kindness of Waymond and the love he has for not just his family, but everyone, she realizes there is something to live for, and with her family grounded in her mind, she fights again to save Joy, this time, and not with her fists, but by giving people what they need and want. She faces Joy, and although she initially lets her go, she convinces her that the world is worth living in and pulls her back from the edge. All at once. Now, with the drama behind them, the family is together working through the IRS issues and accepting Joy's girlfriend into their lives.
I love how the movie is split into three different parts. So the title of the whole thing is Everything Everywhere All at Once, but when the movie starts, you see Joy sitting in this small apartment above the laundromat, dealing with all the tax papers,
Mm-hmm.
and the title card, Everything, pops up overhead, like part one, Everything. And you're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
This is actually a three-part movie, like three movies in one almost.
Yeah.
And it does feel that way. It really, really does.
There are significant shifts in what's happening between each part. Now, the all at once part is really just kind of like the epilogue of the story, right? It's the actual finale. It's like everything is good now. At least the first two parts make up the vast majority of the movie. So maybe we should actually, for once, break down this movie in narrative order, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up until the point of verse jumping, this movie, with very, very minor exceptions, doesn't feel like a sci-fi movie. We start off and it's about a Chinese immigrant family who are just trying to get by. They're running this laundromat. They're having trouble with the language barrier. Even though they speak English, it's not their first language and they're not super comfortable with it, creating some issues. Obviously, none of our three main characters, that being Evelyn, Waymond, and Joy, are really feeling fulfilled or happy in their lives in any way.
Right.
Joy, we know that she's had a contentious relationship with her mother. I definitely get the sense of it is not exclusively because she's gay, but it definitely is not helpful. Her introduction, I think, is especially poignant considering where the movie goes, right? And this is a really big theme you see throughout the movie is these dark circles, which represent the bagel, which, we'll get to. But when you first see Joy, she's staring into a washer, a front load washer, and you see like the clothes spinning around, but it's mainly dark. Those dark circles are prevalent throughout. She obviously feels lost and empty.
Right. Or trapped. Joy is also feeling trapped in a way because she's never been able to break through to her mother and gain full understanding of each other.
Those things, which are explored so much greater later on, are already present and recognizable immediately. That kind of introduction of a character, right? Watching that dark washing machine and just the look on her face, already they're struggling.
Yeah, and that characterization of each of the three of them in the very beginning of the movie, that closing in that everyone is feeling. Waymond is feeling closed in his marriage. Penned
Yeah,
in, he can't be himself because Evelyn is not responding to him. Evelyn is feeling closed in, the laundromat is failing, her father's health is failing,
yeah,
and from what she understands, her relationship with her daughter is failing as well. And she doesn't even really consider Waymond for a while. Joy is feeling closed in. She's never been able to get through to her mother. She is in this relationship with this girl and wants this acceptance from her mother beyond just the fact that she's gay. Like she wants to have a relationship with her mom, and she's feeling
hmm
closed in by her family as well because they're just so traditional. The way that they characterize all that through them, it really makes you feel that. You start to kind of crave the multiversal aspect because you almost want to escape from that entirely.
Joy, who's ironically named, it almost feels just hopeless, right? Like that seems to be her thing, and that will continue. Waymond, you love him from like the minute you meet the character. So happy and he's so personable, but obviously he's not respected at all and basically feels closed in. And we're introduced to the fact that he's seeking divorce. You can see in his interaction with Evelyn, right? He tries to talk to her, he tries to reach out to her, and like it's almost like she's talking to herself because she barely even recognizes he is in front of her whenever he's trying to talk to her. She's so distracted. And that's another thing is Evelyn is very distracted throughout so much of what's going on. Which apparently one of the things that the directors wanted to kind of portray with Evelyn is I believe was supposed to be like both anxiety and ADHD, where she just cannot focus. She feels like she needs to do so much, but she can't focus on anything completely or put really all of herself into something. But there's just so much to do, kind of thing. And we see that with the failing of the laundromat, with the taxes. They arrive at the IRS, and part of the reason that she starts following the instructions that the other Waymond writes to her, which will lead into the, initial multiversal stuff, is because she's having a lot of issues focusing. It's just so interesting how this movie starts, because it doesn't start with you feeling like this is some crazy sci-fi action movie where you're going to be going through a million multiverses,
You get a small glimpse of that though, because there's a small scene where I think Evelyn is talking to Joy, and there's this security camera footage of the laundromat, and all of a sudden it flickers, and you see Waymond all of a sudden tucks his glasses in his shirt pocket, and he starts jumping around everywhere like a kung fu maniac, and grabs something and then runs back to the original frame he was in, and then puts his glasses back on and everything's normal just before she turns back to the screen.
Do you know what he grabs there? Because I didn't know this
I
until
don't
I think the
I
third
don't
time
know
I
what he
saw it.
grabs.
I, he grabs the Bluetooth headsets that he later puts into Evelyn's ears
Okay.
in the elevator.
Yeah, I think the problem is I watch a lot of things on my phone, and so I don't usually get those minute details.
Oof, man, I can't do that.
It's just because of the on-the-go nature I have.
I feel like the true introduction to the multiverse is when she does it. Also, in the elevator, he all of a sudden acts differently. And he's telling her, you can go to the closet or you can go to the desk. And you know what I think he's doing there? I think he did that to both those universes. And basically, like, that's a choice that branches off multiverses, right? So whoever went to the desk would do the verse jumping.
Gotcha.
Like I think that was a choice he created to create two different universes, to create a branch. So basically in this movie, it's seemingly almost every choice create different branches in the multiverse. And so there's just this infinite amount of universes stacked on top of each other. In order to travel between them or access skills, because they can access skills or memories from other universes, they basically have to do weird crap.
Right. Yeah, they have to perform an action that carries them closer to what their counterpart would have done in another multiverse.
Not just that, I think it has to be something that is outside of what you would
Yeah.
logically do.
Right.
The more illogical of the thing, the further you'll slingshot across universes. So, the initial jump where she just jumps into herself in the closet, it's not that crazy.
Well, right, because then, like, not too long after that meeting, he is ripped out of the closet and killed in that alternate universe, and then she is attacked too. Yeah, she's attacked by Deidre.
Deidre, who has like a dark circle on her forehead.
She comes back to like the normal timeline, and they're about to leave.
As they leave Deirdre and they are approaching the elevators, and she asks him about the papers, right? Like, she lifts up the papers, and what he sees are the divorce papers. But on the other side, on the blank side of the page, is where the alternate Waymond had written his instructions. And so she's asking about the multiverse instructions, and he thinks she's asking about the divorce. That whole interaction and that whole confusion leading to her just punching Deirdre in the face, which is what brings the security guards. Yeah, and he eats the chapstick, which lets him learn martial arts.
Yeah, that whole fanny pack nunchuck scene was awesome.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. It really made me think of like Jackie Chan.
So much so that I had to look it up. They originally wanted Jackie Chan for the role of Waymond.
Well, I think originally the movie was supposed to be Jackie Chan, and it was going to be kind of centered on him. But when I guess when they ended up with Michelle Yeoh, or they kind of changed some things and they made it more mother-daughter centric.
Mm-hmm.
Though I mean, Waymond is still a massive and arguably the most important part of the movie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
As we'll get to it, his speech is what kind of saves the day.
Right. Yeah.
But the story is still narratively from Michelle Yeoh's perspective, and so that the more mother daughter and female centric role, I think they didn't want to overshadow anybody by having Jackie Chan in the other role, right? Whether that be him wanting to be the main character or just worried about audiences, focusing more on Jackie Chan and less on what they want the audience to focus on.
I mean, but Waymond was still amazing and gave off those Jackie Chan vibes for sure.
Yeah. Well, do you know who that is? He's the kid in Temple of Doom.
No way. And Goonies? No way. That's awesome. I did not know that. That's really cool.
Yeah. What's funny to me is like, he still looks relatively the same, just like obviously a lot older, but like his voice sounds the same to me. I feel like his voice has not changed in those 35 years or whatever.
Even when he's Alpha Waymond, his voice gets a little deeper.
True, true, true. Maybe it's part of his performance.
Maybe because Waymond, he just gives off that meek dad, and
Yeah.
his voice is a little higher and he's just a cute guy. But then he
Yeah.
turns into Alpha Waymond, his voice gets a little lower. Not much, but a little bit. And
Yeah.
yeah, and he holds himself with much more confidence.
That is the same guy from Temple of Doom and Goonies.
I didn't know that. That makes it so much cooler.
Yeah, so he's been behind the camera for a very long time. He's spoken about that quite a bit in the interviews with this movie and stuff.
The fight happens at the IRS.
That fanny pack fight, man. Holy crap, that was amazing. Where he is on the ground and doing that like breakdancing kicks around the gun to keep it out of their hands. And then he's like spinning the fanny pack in like that nice wide circle as we get the camera following it. And then that final move where he spins it around and kicks it, the clip goes into the guy's nose and he just kicks it down and the dude just face plants.
That was easily the coolest part of that fight. I mean, there were a lot of cool parts in that fight, but the way he finished it was so cool.
The fight choreography of this scene, it might be my favorite of the fight choreography scenes. I love it. There's still some great things about the other ones, but I think this one, I am a sucker for like somebody using a everyday object as a weapon in a fight scene and using it very creatively, not just using it.
Right. Something that Jackie Chan made very popular.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what makes Jackie Chan like one of the best is just how he would use stuff. But anyway, I think that fight was probably my favorite of the movie, though not to take down the other fights. They're still great.
They go to leave from there, but Deidre, an alternate of hers, jumps into the body there and starts attacking them. And so they then try to escape her, and Evelyn, she goes through one multiverse to try and figure out how to use Kung Fu. Like she does a failed jump. Eventually she does get it, but she does a failed jump where she goes into an alternate lifestyle where she didn't leave home with Waymond. And this is the first of many times that we see a bunch of different flashbacks. We see a flashback of her running by her father, and then you get a scene of her and Waymond as children talking to each other on like a fire escape, and then flash of her going with him in the car, leaving her parents to go to America with him. And instead of that happening, you see a break. You see a fracture in the screen happen. And instead, you see her turning away from Waymond when they're talking on the fire escape. And she's standing there watching him leave in the car. And she goes on to train in Kung Fu and then gets movie deals and is now this famous actress that also knows Kung Fu. And so she eventually taps into this person to help fight off the evil Deidre.
I don't know if you noticed this or caught it, but a lot of the ones that like once she becomes a movie star, those are all of actual appearances by Michelle Yeoh during her premieres and interviews and stuff.
That's
in
awesome.
One of the quick shots, you can actually see a promotional sign for Crazy Rich Asians. That version of Evelyn is basically actually Michelle Yeoh. And she takes on Deirdre in a really awesome display of martial arts. And Waymond is initially confused until Alpha Waymond takes over again. They continue trying to escape until they run into some cops. And she's having a hard time because she's not letting go of that other universe. And Waymond explains that you need to let go because your mind can fracture. And that's what happened to Jobu Tupaki, is that Jobu Tupaki jumped into all these universes and their mind fractured and they no longer are sane. They experience all worlds at all times. And that Jobu Tupaki is planning something, building something that could destroy everything. While Evelyn is struggling with this, they get grabbed by the cops. Jobu Tupaki appears. It is Joy. I mean, we definitely knew that before because that was revealed a little bit earlier.
When it starts digging into all of the multiverse stuff, it goes from 0 to 60.
Yeah.
But when Joy shows up, that's when it goes from 60 to 180.
Yeah.
And things start getting really weird as she pulls in other hers from other universes. Her costume continually changes. All this weird stuff happens to the cops.
She like blows up the dude's head, turning it into confetti. Right. When the guy puts a gun on the back of her head and is like, put your hands on your head. And she does that and then pulls the hair aside and her face is there now.
This particular death is referenced later, but she takes a cop, she spins him around, and all of a sudden he's in like a dancing kind of dress with fruit on his head.
They're in like a tango outfit, basically.
Yeah, and she like spins him and he does a little dance move and then he gets shot by the cop. And later on, Joy does reference this by saying, you know, you danced a man to death.
Yeah.
And then she actually comes and interacts with Evelyn. And, you start to realize she doesn't want to kill her, which was interesting to me. And this is where I felt like it started to kind of open up. She's been looking for this particular Evelyn for a while. And she's been killing a bunch of other ones. And she doesn't kill this one. And it started me on the path of wondering, okay, is this just another Joy that had a terrible relationship with her mother? And this isn't actually going to be like a fight and kill one another to save the world kind of thing.
At that moment, which by the way, the whole like hand thing she does to reveal that other world, that whole camera movement and the design of how they did that, it blows my mind. And they do that again later, even cooler. They put their hands together and split it up, and then like she opens it up and it's like all of a sudden a different universe and introduces the everything bagel. That she put everything on a bagel. Hopes, fears, desires.
Every breed of dog or every dog picture or something. Alpha Waymond describes as not just a black hole, but something that is sucking in everything good and decent in all universes. And he explains it as like, you know, you wake up and you feel like, you know, your hair just isn't going the way that it used to, or the world feels like it's going crazy. And that's how he kind of describes this bagel that Jobu Tupaki is building.
There's so much bagel imagery leading up to this moment too. At one point while they're running through the IRS office, they eat bagels. When you get flashes of the Alpha universe where the multiverse travel started and Jobu Tupaki originates from, there's spray paint around that's like something about bagel or fear the bagel or praise the bagel.
You're starting to maybe get behind the whole multiverse thing. And then Jobu Tupaki shows up and that crazy scene happens with her and the cops. That's where I think it could start to lose some people, because then it goes off the rails.
For the rest of the everything part of the movie, it does go off the rails, right? Because then Alpha Gong Gong shows up, her father, and he knocks Jobu Tupaki out, and then Jobu Tupaki puts her attention on a different universe, so Joy is mainly herself again. And the whole family is in this one room. The other world's version of her father tries to basically convince her to kill her daughter. And that's when she decides that the only way for her to stop her daughter from doing all this stuff is by becoming like her, because she won't kill her daughter. That's when she starts just doing random weird stuff to verse jump as much as she can.
Putting so much strain on her mind until finally she does experience everything everywhere.
That's when we get like the blind Evelyn, blinded as a child and became a singer. And we get the sign twirling Evelyn, and she steals Riot Shield and fights off all those people, which, by the way, the scene where they're in the little panic room and he has all his agents there outside the panic room. And he's like, okay, everyone, prepare yourselves. And they all just start doing the most random crap.
just so that they can verse jump.
Yeah, licking a light bulb, opera singing.
Someone calls their mom, I
Oh,
think, in the
really?
background. Yeah, someone starts talking to their mother on the phone. This one guy goes and photocopies his butt. Like, it's
Yeah.
just all these random things so that they can access other universes and other universe skills. And it's so funny.
And then Evelyn comes out and beats them all up. And we continue kind of traveling through the IRS in these fights. Joy and Waymond figuring out like what is she doing, because this is her version of Joy and Waymond, and they're just like, why is she doing these things? Oh, she's doing this stuff, and she has to do weird stuff in order to be able to fight like this. And
They start giving her suggestions. So at one point, Joy starts fighting this one agent who loses his ability to verse jump.
they hit each other in the earpieces, and they both kind of lose track of their other people.
Right, yeah, they lose their connection. And so instinctively, this other guy who is an agent from a different universe,
He's like, give me another path. The camera pans, and you just see like the award that Deirdre pointed to earlier on. And he starts taking his pants off, and Joy's just like, I think he's trying to put it up his butt. And he's like trying to sit on it, and she's pulling it all around.
I agree with you. I think that the fanny pack nunchuck fight is one of the best in the movie. That second best is this fight because
Yeah.
they're fighting while he's trying to sit on the award and she's trying to get it out of the way. And then finally they get outside of this little cubicle area that they're fighting in, and it's just sitting on the floor and they're fighting, and there's this slow-mo shot of another guy who jumps over them. Obviously, he lands on the award.
He has his pants fully off. He is completely nude. I'm not complaining, but they made an interesting choice that I was pretty shocked by. Actually, to look this up. They blurred the whole thing. They didn't feel the need to do for other things that make it R. I mean, it's an R-rated movie. One person I saw online said, like, sometimes they think it was a comedic decision because, like, sometimes having a bleeped word can be funnier than the actual curse word. And I actually agree with this. I think the blur makes it funnier than if you actually saw everything.
I'm appreciative of it because in the fight scene that commences after the fact, because the guy that she was fighting originally ends up finding something to stick up his butt and verse jump. And so she ends up fighting these two guys, and the things are just hanging out of their butts all the while she's fighting.
She continues to verse jump until Joe Buttabaki appears again. And then she just like pukes a boatload and falls over dead. And the credits roll.
I really liked that because the credits start rolling, and I looked at the time and I was like, wait a second, there's still a little bit of movie left. The camera starts to pan away from the credits, and you realize that you're back in her recollection of movie actress Evelyn's multiverse, and her movie premiere had just ended. And you're like, what?
And so then she really starts to experience all these universes at once, and she finally talks to Joe Buttabaki, which I think at this point we can just call Joy, and finds out that Joy was never trying to kill her. Joy was trying to find somebody that could experience everything everywhere like herself, because she has this very nihilistic view of nothing matters. That's what she says, right? Because no matter what decision you make, there's always an infinite amount of other universes where the opposite happened. She just has felt completely hopeless because of this and created the bagel to kill herself. She wanted to see if her mom would convince her otherwise. The whole thing that she's been doing is really just a cry for help.
And you start to see that because then they start to go and talk about the Alpha universe that the other Waymond is from the beginning of the movie. And he talks about how in his universe, Evelyn was this great scientist who found out about the multiverse and created the verse jumping and all of that technology. And her daughter was her first test subject, and she pushed her daughter so hard that she became Joe Buttabaki because her mind fractured. She started off this journey thinking, hey, this would be a good connection with my mother. I get to work with her, I get to experience what she's doing, and I get to make her proud of me. And it ended up backfiring on her. And ever since then, she's still trying to find that connection with her mom. And it was just such an interesting turnaround. And the fact that she didn't kill that Evelyn, it dealt with some of these things so well. And it didn't balk to ask those big questions. Like, if a multiverse does exist, does everything just not matter?
Let's talk quickly about the different universes that we see, like some of the more weird ones, right? Because like we see a lot, like we've talked about the singer and the movie star and the sign twirler. We also get a universe where Deirdre and Evelyn are in a relationship and they have hot dogs for fingers. We see that at one point in evolution, a ape with hot dogs for fingers killed.
An ape with opposable thumbs.
Yeah. And so we get the hot dog finger universe. We get the universe with Rakakuni, which is this whole thing where she's talking to Joy and Waymond, and she's like, it's like that movie, Rakakuni. And they're like, what are you talking about? And Joy's like, do you mean Ratatouille? And I thought, oh, that's a really hilarious joke, right? And then all of a sudden we get a universe where Raccoon is controlling a chef.
It started as just her language barrier showing again. And then when we
Yeah.
actually go back to that universe, she's a chef at like a hibachi restaurant. And she goes into the kitchen, and it turns out that the other chef that's competing with her actually does have a raccoon on his head working him like Ratatouille. When she ends up going to the dark side, believing in the bagel and nothing
Yeah.
matters in the universe, she ends up reporting the guy to animal control or whatever,
Yeah.
and they take the raccoon away.
But yeah, that's the voice of the raccoon is Randy Newman.
Evelyn, once her mind is broken and she's seen the bagel and she's starting to kind of believe in the view of Joe Butchpaki.
She's experiencing all these universes so much, and they kind of have this confrontation where they jump through multiple universes, where they're a pinata, where they're drawings, where they're in prison, and she now is like, yeah, nothing matters. There's always something where it did elsewhere.
Right. And that's what leads her to, in each of these different universes that they kind of dive a little deeper into, she ends up just kind of ruining things. So she reports the raccoon in the universe where she ruins the relationship with her and Deidre.
But she ruins the New Year's party, the Chinese New Year's party at her laundromat in a universe similar to her own. And finally, she just lays down, and we enter a universe where life does not exist, and the two of them, Joy and Evelyn, are just rocks.
And they're just sitting at the top of the mountain, and it's completely silent for a good couple seconds. And then all of a sudden, text appears over one of the rocks, and you find that it's Evelyn speaking. And then text appears over a rock next to it, and you find that it's Joy speaking, and they have a conversation. It's a moment where finally you get to slow down a little bit, because all these things happen in all these other universes, and then finally you just get to stop and read, and you get a chance to relax as they kind of talk it out a little bit. It's phenomenal. I couldn't stop laughing during that whole thing, even though there was nothing really super comedic about it.
It's crazy how they could possibly make a scene where two characters literally become rocks and make it compelling, make it interesting, make it dramatic, and then she basically has decided, you're right, let's get into the bagel. But then she becomes distracted because Waymond is trying to make things right at the New Year's party and talking to Deirdre, who had showed up with cops, and he gets her out of trouble. And she all of a sudden is like, well, that doesn't make sense. In multiple of these universes where Waymond and her together or both existing, she's talking to him. And in the original universe, he gives this big speech about being kind and loving. And in the movie universe where they never ended up together, he talks about you think that I'm weak, that you're a fighter, but this is just how I fight. It's hard to call it a monologue because it's like multiple monologues across multiple worlds happening at once, but all kind of portray the same theme. There is something to live for. Even though Evelyn's the main character, Waymond is the heart of this movie. He's the one who turns it all around, because it's his love and his kindness and his genuine nature that leads Evelyn to turn away from the bagel. Such a weird thing to say. And we get that second shot of Joe Butchpaki using their hands to create the bagel, right? Like she does that weird thing where you see partially the other universe, and then she lifts it up and you see the bagel, and then the bagel is in the original universe we were in to begin with. Joy is trying to get into the bagel, and all the agents are like, let her. And Evelyn doesn't want to let her, but she has been moved by Wayman's speech. And what she does then, the fight that ensues, is she fights them with kindness. She's giving them what they want.
She finds a way to heal them, put them at peace. And the interesting thing to me is that Alpha Wayman's whole approach was to fight his way out of any situation. And maybe not constantly, but a few times he mocks the original Waymond for being weak. And it turns out that original Waymond was stronger than anyone thought. And this is a theme that was also kind of played out a little bit in The Boys recently as well. This theme of men who are perceived as being weak and meek and walked over are sometimes stronger than anyone would think. I mean, Wayman stuck it out with his wife for so long because he loved her. He wanted what's best for her, and he worked so hard to do all of these things. He was just the epitome of a servant to her.
Even before, when like he's seeking divorce, the reason he's seeking it is because he actually wants it to spark healing and conversation. He's not really hoping for divorce. He just thinks that by bringing up divorce, it might lead to reconciliation. He is just like the pure of heart of the movie. And now Evelyn is fully on board, and she has the ability to put everyone at peace by this verse jumping that Joe Bitapaki used to kill everybody. But then there's kind of two final confrontations, right? The first one with her father, where he's trying to say, let her go, let Joey go. And she gives him the line, you might have been willing to abandon your daughter, but I'm not willing to do that. And we get like, because there's so much set up with that of,
in multiple universes, she left home and he just let her go.
Yeah, he was disappointed that she was a girl in the first place, that if she didn't do exactly what he wanted, then he was disappointed and would just abandon her, let her go to America with no support other than Waymond, because he didn't approve of Waymond. And now he literally suggested killing Joy, like his granddaughter. We finally see him kind of accept that he was in the wrong and that Evelyn's making the right call here. And then we get a little bit of a fight between Evelyn and Joy at the top of the stairs. And she's just like, let me go. And for a moment she does, but she stops. And we get, again, that near similar to original universe world. And she gives this big speech to her regarding
their relationship.
Yeah, their relationship. And it just hits so hard. Like I would try and reiterate it, but I don't think I could do it justice, honestly. It's such an emotional and dramatic scene in such a bonkers movie.
Right, where she reveals in that speech that there are things that matter. Being present with the ones that you love and the relationships that you build and foster over your lifetime. Those are the things that really, really matter. Finding joy in the little things, being present. That eventually does end up winning over Joe Bitapaki, and she is able to exit the bagel.
Well, and you get that amazing scene of her kind of reaching her hand back out of the bagel and Evelyn grabbing it. And she's not strong enough to pull her out, but then her father and Waymond and others pull, and they all join together to kind of pull her out. And that was the end of Everywhere. And we get a final all at once moment where it's basically a redo of the beginning of the movie where they're going to the IRS, except for they're doing it the right way this time. Like their Joy's girlfriend is driving them there, and Joy is both present in the family, and they have accepted her for who she is. And you see the love and admiration between Waymond and Joy. And we get back to Deirdre's desk and the movie ends.
Right. And you can just see the stark contrast between the beginning when they're going to the IRS and the end of the chaos that they're feeling in their family and the peace that they now have. And the relationships are definitely changed, and it's so cool to see that. And the path that is taken, yes, is weird, it's wacky, it's wild, but you can see all that growth and all that changing, and it is really cool.
Yeah. And it's deep.
Oh yeah.
It's deep. It hits hard. I'm not a big crier in movies. I didn't cry in this movie, but I've definitely seen a lot of people say that they have cried quite a bit in this movie, and I could see that happening at that either the Waymond monologue or the final scene between the mother and the daughter. Especially if you are a girl who's had a contentious relationship with your mother, like I could see that hitting
Yeah.
hard for
Or
sure.
any parent and child that have had a contentious relationship. I
True,
mean, that's
true,
something
true.
that I've definitely thought of with my son as I raise him. Like, am I eventually going to have issues like this? I hope not. I mean, I hope we don't have to travel multiverses to fix things. That is definitely something that I worry about as a parent, wanting to foster my relationship with my child.
Keep them from creating an everything bagel that will suck in all universes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wayman's speech and Evelyn's speech were really, really powerful. I'm glad we didn't try to quote them or anything because we couldn't do it justice, but I would highly recommend watching this movie, if not just for some superb, heartfelt moments. Was there anything that you didn't like about this movie?
That's a good question. No, I don't think there really was anything that I didn't like about the movie.
Personally, I honestly didn't dislike much in this at all. But I have to say, the hot dog fingers universe was really, really unsettling to me. I don't know why, it just really
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, no, and I've heard that from other people as well. It didn't bother me. I found it funny. But yeah, so I think there's moments in this movie that I could see people not liking, but I think it's all a matter of preference and not a matter of quality. I think they did such a good job on the writing and such a good job on the fight choreography, the blocking, the creativity. Like they brought so much to it, but I could definitely see from a taste perspective, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But for me, all of those things were endearing to straight up genius to me.
The thing that I like the most is that they didn't just show you these universes and then never return to them. You actually got, not in depth, but you got some snippets of the story
Yeah.
behind those universes.
Yeah, I mean, there were multiverses that we didn't get a lot behind, right? Like the prison one and the animated one and the one where they're pinatas.
No, some were definitely just gags, but even they were returned to.
I won't even call them gags, right? Because we are cycling through those in Joy's kind of villain monologue where
Mm-hmm.
she is like, it doesn't matter what happens here. And she like cuts into herself and then they're pinatas. And she's like, because somewhere it would just wash away in the sea of possibilities or whatever, and so they served a purpose, and it's so hard to see this and then see multiverse of madness and be like, where's the madness?
I mean, it was deep and it was fun at the same time. And some movies can get lost in that. And I felt like the pacing
Yeah.
was never out of whack either. It kept moving and everything, almost everything served a purpose.
Oh, for sure. No moments were wasted. No character moments were wasted. Every character had a purpose to being there.
I thought the themes were perfect for it too. I mean, you have this character who has this ability to experience all timelines, all multiverses at once, and yet the theme is to be present and to find peace in where you are.
Mhm.
This is one of those movies that we talked about this last week. I feel like this is one of those movies that's timeless in a sense that you can apply so many different things to it. You could take out so much and interpret whatever you
Mhm.
want really from it. But for me, it felt like the theme was being present where you are, enjoying that time that you have to build up those relationships. And they said it multiple times in the film, like you only get a few moments that really define your life or that make up, your life, and don't waste those moments.
I really appreciated the depictions through fantasy, through sci-fi, but the depictions of mental health. Joy's depression and Evelyn's anxiety and ADHD, and how they're amplified through this multiverse, sci-fi, fantasy-esque world, and just each of the main three characters really having like specific character traits. It's really about pulling Joy out of her depression and helping Evelyn through her anxiety and ADHD to focus on life in the moment, you know?
I actually honestly hadn't thought of that. At the end, they do seem fulfilled. They seem at peace, and yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I mean their life isn't perfect at the end, right? Like, but they're living it and they're living it together. But yeah, I mean I definitely saw Joy's journey as a journey through depression. She starts literally staring into a black void. She's just aimlessly wandering about all these multiverses saying nothing matters, who cares what happens to me or anyone else, and basically she created the everything bagel as a way to kill herself
Mm, hmm.
and pulling her back from that brink. I think those were kind of like the powerful moments that really struck a chord. These are very, very, very serious topics, and you could very easily make like a straight, serious drama about these things. But I think sometimes it's more effective to have those elements managed through some fantastical element.
Right. There's no reason why it can't also be interesting and entertaining, as well as, educational
Sure.
or insightful. I mean, I think I said this earlier. The way that they tackled some of these big questions and big themes was really well done. I was really quite surprised because I've seen other movies that are similar in attempting this tone, and they don't do as good a job. They don't have the reverence really for it.
It is a miracle that they can juggle this tone. It's not an easy task. And they did great. And we managed to go from the question, what did you not like, to just talk about all the things we like.
There's really not much to
There
dislike
really
about it.
isn't.
I
I
mean,
agree.
it's so well done. And I mean, it's gripping and entertaining too. Like just when you could even possibly be getting slightly bored, they somehow work in another action scene that some it might even help to explain some things, give a little exploitation at the same time as you're just being entertained by this crazy
Yeah.
fight. It's very impressive.
Well, Waymond. So he's been working on films behind the scenes for a long time, and he mentioned that what inspired him to get back in front of the camera, because like one of the big reasons he stopped being in front of the camera is because, especially in the 80s and 90s, there just wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for
Mm,
Asian actors. And I think he's also mentioned that like a lot of times, even the opportunities that were there were little bit stereotyped and stuff, but
mm.
he just didn't have the opportunities and wasn't getting the amount of work he wanted or needed. And so he moved to be behind the camera. And but Crazy Rich Asians actually is what inspired him to get back in front of the camera again.
Huh. That's funny. I mean, I'm glad he's back because honestly, I loved him in the stuff that he was in the 80s.
The main family unit, all three of them did so good in this movie.
Yeah, I think I have one more thing though. So I was really curious about this. Jobu Tupaki. I was thinking, what does this mean? Does it have some sort of strange meaning? With this movie having some depth to it, I was thinking, okay, this has to mean something. So I looked it up.
I hope it means something totally ridiculous and silly and meaning. If like I want it to mean something, but I want it to mean like something super silly and stupid.
All right, we'll see if this scratches your itch. So in a podcast, they were interviewed, the writers of the show. And this is what Daniel Kwan had to say about the name Jobutbaki. He says, "Me and my wife were trying to figure out baby names, and I really wanted a fun name to say that every time we said it was a treat for the mouth." He had just read a book, and inside the book, there's a story about a baby, this imagined spiritual baby that she's looking for. So every time this woman sees the baby, she's like, "Is that you, Kubal Kabandi? Are you the baby I've been looking for?" Like she thinks there's a baby out in the universe that is her spiritual soulmate. And this is Daniel Kwan talking, and he goes, and so I was like, that is so fun to say. So when they were talking about baby names, he just started throwing out all these random names like Joe Butupaki to his wife. And he's like, what if we named our kid Joe Butupaki? Wouldn't it be so fun to say that name every day? So that's how they came up with that. He says later on, it was kind of like we were literally just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And there is actually a scene in the movie, a quick flash, where there's a hand throwing spaghetti. And so her name just literally means nothing because her personality is so fractured that she feels like nothing matters, and so she just takes a name that just means absolutely nothing.
So, yeah, I mean, that's fitting. I was hoping that it was like something ridiculous in another language that we wouldn't understand, and it kind of be like an in joke for anybody who does understand whatever language they would pick there. But, that works too.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation about it being Telugu language, something from the southern part of India, and meaning like pocket gun or small revolver or pistol. There's a bunch of like theories, but I think that's the actual origin. So next time, in continuation of our preparing for the end of the Rings of Power show and being able to review that, we're going to keep going through the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and we're going to be talking about the Two Towers extended edition, of course. So that's all for today's episode. Please subscribe, follow, and leave a review on whatever podcasting medium you use. And please check out our YouTube channel for additional content. Join us next week, and thank you for listening to the Ultimate Age of the Geek. So we're kind of new to this podcast thing, but we could not have gotten started without Buzzsprout. They make things so easy, such as telling us what equipment is necessary for a podcaster, even a beginning podcaster like ourselves. They even offer you the ability to blast your podcast out to every major distributor. And right now they're having a promotion that if you sign up to use one of their very cheap plans, you can get a $20 Amazon gift card to go towards maybe equipment. So give Buzzsprout a try today and click the link in our description.